The rain had been falling for 3 hours when the knocker sounded, and Adrian Stern, 9th Duke of Renford, knew before he reached the door that no decent visitor came to Ravensmoor at such an hour. He opened it himself. The footman had gone down to dry the storm-soaked linens, and he was the only soul still awake, standing in the hall with a candle, because sleep had stopped coming easily years ago. He turned the iron handle, and the wind threw the door wide, and the rain came in across the flagstones like a thing released. A woman stood on his step. She held a child against her hip, a boy wrapped in a man's coat far too large for him, and the water ran from the brim of her bonnet in a steady silver line. She did not flinch from the cold. She did not lower her eyes the way women lowered their eyes before a duke. She looked at him as though she had waited 11 years to do exactly this, and found her face equal to it. "Your Grace," she said. "It is past midnight," Adrian answered. "Whatever your business, it can wait for morning and a magistrate." "It cannot," she said. "It has waited long enough." And then she said the name. Vaughan, one word. He felt it go through him like cold water down the spine, felt the candle gutter in his suddenly unsteady hand. He had not heard that name spoken aloud in 11 years. He had paid a great deal of money to ensure no one ever would again, had watched it struck from a parish register with his own eyes, had told himself it was buried as deep as the man it belonged to. And here it was, in the mouth of a stranger, with a child looking out from the folds of a dead man's coat. The woman watched what the name did to his face, and then, this was the part he would remember for the rest of his life, she smiled. "May we come in?" she said. It was not a question. He stepped back. He told himself afterward he had 100 reasons. The soaked child, the law unkind to a duke who let an infant freeze on his step. All true. None of it the reason. The reason was the name, and the smile, and the certainty in her that he had lost in himself long ago. She crossed the threshold and set the boy down, and the child swayed on his feet and stared up at the staircase climbing into the dark, at the portraits of dead Sterns glaring down. Her eyes, not the grey of porcelain heroines, but a dark and steady hazel, almost amber where the candle caught them, went straight to his and stayed. "You don't know me," she said. "You wouldn't. I was nothing the last time you saw me. You handed me £40 in a coaching inn at Doncaster and told me that if I ever spoke the name again, you would see me in a debtor's cell with the child taken from my arms. There was a stain on the ceiling shaped like a hanged man, and I lay awake under it counting your money and deciding I would not die." His mouth had gone dry. "I do not know what you imagine you don't." She said it gently, almost kindly, and that was worse than fury. "Don't waste it on me. I have come a very long way, and I am very tired, and I have no patience left for a man pretending he cannot remember the worst thing he ever did." The boy had wandered to the foot of the stairs. He put his small hand on the carved newel post, the snarling lion the first Duke of Renford had commissioned 200 years before, and looked back at Adrian with an expression that stopped the breath in his throat. It was Sebastian's expression, the precise tilt of the chin, the line of the brow Adrian had spent 11 years failing to forget. His brother's face, in the hall of the house that should have been his brother's and was instead his own. "Who is the boy?" Adrian said. It came out a whisper. When she spoke again, the smile was gone, replaced by something that frightened him far more than hatred, patience, a woman with all the time in the world and the only card that mattered. "His name is Thomas," she said, "and I think you already know whose son he is." She said nothing more that night. He gave them rooms in the East Wing and sent up the housekeeper, Mrs. Pell, who took one look at the woman's face by candlelight and went grey as ash. Mrs. Pell had been at Ravensmoor 30 years. Mrs. Pell, Adrian understood with a sick lurch, recognized her too. He did not sleep. He stood at his study window with a brandy he did not drink, and thought about the name, and the inn at Doncaster, and the thing he had done at 24. He had told himself for 11 years it was mercy, that a marriage no one acknowledged was no marriage, that a widowed woman of no family was better served by £40 and a clean disappearance than a doomed claim against the most powerful family in the North Riding. He had told himself his mother was right. He had been very good at telling himself things. In the morning he sent for her, and she came down in a gown turned and mended more than once. The boy scrubbed and fed beside her, and she sat at his table as though she had every right to it, which, the thought he could not stop, she did. "You'll want to know why I've come," she said, buttering the boy's bread. "I find," said Adrian, "that I want to know a great many things. Then, we are alike in that, at last." She lifted her eyes. "First I'll tell you what you bought at the Saracen's Head for £40. You thought you were buying my silence. Silence I'd have given you for nothing in those days. I was too frightened to do otherwise. What you bought was 11 years of my believing you were exactly the man you pretended to be. A cold one. A small one, the kind who does his mother's cruelty for her and calls it sense." She set down the knife. "I came prepared to hate that man. And then he opened his own front door at midnight, with no servant to do it for him, and looked at my son's face and went white as bone. And I thought, perhaps it is more complicated than £40. It was the cruelest kind thing said to him in years. He had armor for contempt, and for blackmail, half-braced since the word Vaughan left her mouth to hear a sum named. He would have paid it, almost grateful for the simplicity of a price. He had no armor at all for a woman who looked at the worst of him and reserved her judgment. "What is it you want?" he said. "I haven't decided whether I want anything from you at all. But I'll tell you what I have." She drew from the bodice of her gown a folded paper, soft and grey at the creases from years of carrying, and laid it on the cloth between the teapot and the jam. A true copy of a marriage register. Sebastian Edward Sterne, Marquess of Daundery, to Clara Ann Vaughan, the 14th of June, 1805, at St. Bride's in Cumberland. 3 witnesses signing. Your brother married me, Your Grace, a year before he drowned. I am his widow, and Thomas his son, born in lawful wedlock the spring after. She let it sit, which makes my son, and not you, the 9th Duke of Renford. Adrian looked at the paper and did not touch it. You destroyed the original, she went on, pouring herself more tea. I watched your solicitor do it, Greaves, in the vestry at St. Bride's, the August after Sebastian died. He tore the page from the register and put it in the fire, and never knew I was in the gallery. Nor that 2 months before, fearing what your family would do, I had paid the curate a shilling for an attested copy. He is dead now, the curate, but he was an honest man, and registered the copy with the Bishop's Court at Carlisle before he gave it me. There is a record of the record. Your Grace. You buried a name. You did not bury it deep enough. The boy looked between them, with the grave incomprehension of a child who knows the words above his head will decide his life, and cannot make them out. He had Sebastian's chin, and the stern hands, long-fingered, restless, on a cord around his neck, hidden until he reached up to scratch it, hung a heavy gold ring. Adrian's whole body went cold. Where did he get that? This? Clara drew the cord over the boy's head and held the ring to the light, and the engraved lion of Renford turned slowly on its gold field. The same snarling lion as the newel post, as the seal on every document Adrian had signed for 11 years. Your brother's signet. He put it in my hand on the dock at Whitehaven the morning he sailed, Keep this for the child, in case the sea is unkind. The sea was unkind. I sewed it into the lining of Thomas's first coat and never sold it, though there were winters I could have eaten a year on what it would fetch. She lowered it back over the boy's head. It is his. It was always going to be his. The only question that has ever mattered is whether he would have to fight you for it. That question hung between them for the better part of a fortnight, and Adrian could not answer it, because to answer it, he would have to decide what kind of man he was, and he had spent 11 years arranging his life so he would never find out. He should have sent for Greaves and devised a counter, a way to break a country curate's old copy and a widow's word. That is what his mother would have told him to do, and he had never once failed to do what his mother told him. Instead, he found reasons to keep Clara Vaughan at Ravensmoor. The roads were bad, the boy had a cough, and each evening he found himself in the library where she had taken to sitting, drawn there against every instinct of self-preservation he owned. "You stare at him," she said one evening. The boy had fallen asleep over a book of engravings, and the fire had burned low. "Thomas, you stare at him as though he's a ghost. He has my brother's face. He has more than that." She did not look up from her mending. "He has Sebastian's temper, none at all until all at once. His trick of going still before he laughs. His way of forgiving people he shouldn't." Her needle stopped. "He asks me sometimes what his father was like, and I can't. The words come out like a sermon, all virtues and no man. I've forgotten the sound of his voice. 11 years, and I've forgotten the one thing I swore to keep." And Adrian heard himself say, he sang flat, could not hold a tune to save his soul, and sang anyway, loudly, in church, to torment our mother. She would go rigid in the pew, and he would catch my eye, and he stopped, his throat closed. He had not spoken of his brother as a living man in 11 years, only as a tragedy, a title, a vacancy he had filled. He was the best of us, the only good thing this family ever made, and we threw him away because he loved beneath him, and I helped, and I have never. He could not finish it. She had set down the mending and was looking at him across the dying fire with that dark, steady gaze, no triumph in it, and no forgiveness either, only a terrible attention, as if she were seeing him at last, and was not certain what she saw. "That," she said quietly, "is the first true thing you've said to me." His hand had moved. He was near enough to close the distance with a breath, and she had not moved away. The boy stirred. The ring on its cord slid across the engraving with a small gold whisper. And the moment broke, because he made it break, stood and crossed to the window and gripped the cold sill until his knuckles ached, because he was a coward, and the one thing his cowardice had taught him was to recognize the precise instant before he might become brave. "You should sleep," he said to the glass. "It's late." He heard her gather the boy and pause at the door. "You keep doing that," she said, "stepping back from the edge of yourself. One day you won't have time to." The day came sooner than either expected, in a black travelling chaise with the Renford arms on the panel, because Adrian's mother had heard, servants' news runs faster than any post. The Dowager, Lady Honoria Stern, came into the hall on a bright, hard morning in the boy's 3rd week beneath the roof like winter through a door, tall and dry and upright at 63, her cane striking the flagstones in a slow, deliberate measure Adrian had feared since he was a child. "I am told," she said, without preamble, without removing her gloves, "that you have a Vaughan in the house. Mother and a brat she calls Stern." Her pale eyes, he had her eyes, that was the cruelty of it, swept the hall and found Clara at the turn of the stairs with the boy's hand in hers. Adrian watched her see the child's face, the chin, the brow, her dead son looking out of a living boy, and watched her not flinch, and had never in his life admired and hated her so much at once. "So," she said, "it lived." "His name is Thomas," said Clara. I did not ask its name. The dowager turned back to her son. "I dealt with this once. I will not have it undone by your sentiment. 11 years ago your brother contracted a degrading clandestine marriage to a creature with no name, no fortune, and no shame, then had the consideration to drown before he could install her at this table. I corrected the error. The marriage was expunged, the woman paid, the line passed cleanly to you, where it belongs." She set both hands on her cane. "I will not allow a Cumberland milkmaid and her by blow to call my grandson a bastard and my surviving son a thief. Whatever she has shown you is forged or stolen, and either way it will burn as cleanly as the first." "It is neither," said Clara, coming down the stairs, the boy with her, grave and frightened and game. "And I am not a milkmaid. My father was a clergyman, madam, which is more than your money can say of its own origins 3 generations back." The cane lifted an inch and struck the floor. "You insolent, I think," Clara said, "that you should be very careful how you speak to me. I have spent 11 years being afraid of your son, and I have used up all my fear, and there is none left over for you." It was magnificent. Adrian's heart turned over. But he saw what Clara could not, his mother's anger smoothing into something colder, the way she stopped fighting the instant she understood she could not win the room by force. She lost only battles she intended to lose, and Adrian, who had watched her do it all his life, felt the floor drop away beneath the morning. "How interesting," his mother said, "almost pleasant now, that you brought the proof of your claim into the house of the man it would ruin." She smiled. The family smile, the one that meant nothing kind. Adrian, a word. Now, in the study his mother did not sit. "You will give me the paper," she said, "and the ring. By tonight. You will put that woman in a chaise back to Cumberland with money enough that she stays there, and make certain the curate's copy and the bishop's record go the way of the original. You have men who do such things. Your father had them, and they did not retire." She studied him. "Or, this is your temptation, you always were the weak one, you will let her take it to law, and become the man who held a dukedom he knew was not his for 11 years. They will not merely strip the title, Adrian, they will gale you, and me beside you. Is that what you want, to hang us both for a milkmaid's bastard?" "He is your grandson," Adrian said. "He is a mistake my elder son made, and my younger son was meant to bury." Her voice did not rise. "I did the hard thing once so that you would never have to. I will not watch you undo it out of guilt and a pretty face. Choose. You have until nightfall. The paper. Or the family." She left him with it. He stood in the study a long time. Then he climbed to the disused west wing rooms, where his brother's things had been put away after the drowning, and sat among the dust-sheeted furniture in the failing light, and opened a trunk, and found beneath the riding boots a child's wooden soldier, painted in the colors of a regiment Sebastian had never lived to join, and held it in his 2 hands, and wept as he had not let himself weep at the funeral, where his mother had been watching. That was where Clara found him. She did not ask why. She looked at the soldier in his hands, and understood, the way she understood everything, and sat down beside him in the dark. "She wants me to destroy it," he said. "The copy, the record at Carlisle, send you away and bury it again. And the worst of it, Clara, is that I can. By spring it would be as though you had never come, Thomas a curiosity in a Cumberland churchyard, and I Duke of Renford until I died, and no one living would ever know." "I know," she said. "Why are you telling me, instead of doing it?" "Because I want you to know what I'm choosing against." He turned the soldier over. I spent 11 years being the man my mother made. I did the thing at Doncaster because she told me a clean cruelty was kinder than a slow ruin, and I believed her. Because believing her meant I kept everything and paid nothing. I am not going to do it again. He looked at her. Tomorrow, I am taking the boy to the Bishop's Court at Carlisle. I am going to swear to the marriage myself. I knew of it within a month of his death, and let my mother expunge it, and file the petition that makes Thomas the 9th Duke of Renford and makes me nothing at all. Before witnesses, before I can step back from the edge of myself one more time. She was very still. You understand, you'll lose everything. Title, income, house, all to a child. You could go to prison for the years you held it. And you're doing this before I've said one word about whether I forgive you. Yes. Why? Because it's his. His voice cracked. It was always going to be his, and the only question that ever mattered was whether he'd have to fight me for it. I'd rather be ruined than be the thing my mother made me. I'm not doing it to earn you. I'm doing it because I should have done it 11 years ago, and you were brave enough to do it alone, and I am so ashamed of the difference between us that I can hardly look at you. She took the soldier from his hands and set it on the floor, and took his face between her cold palms, and for one suspended moment in the dust and the dark he was certain, and then she pressed her forehead to his, and they stayed there, breathing the same air, not quite touching, while the last light went out of the window. Tomorrow, she said against his mouth. Do it tomorrow. Then we'll see about the rest, about forgiveness, about all of it. She drew back, her eyes wet and fierce. Don't let her stop you. Whatever you think she's capable of, double it. He should have listened more closely to that. They left at dawn, the three of them, and it was the lightest hour Adrian had known in his adult life. The boy's nose against the glass naming sheep. Clara's shoulder warm against his. The dread of what he meant to surrender outweighed by the relief of deciding to be brave before the moment passed. He had sent word ahead to the registrar. Greaves was meeting them. He had it all arranged. He had forgotten that his mother arranged things too. The summons was waiting at the coaching inn, served by a tipstaff into Clara's own hands before they had ordered dinner, an information laid before the magistrates that Clara Vaughan, spinster, of no fixed abode, had unlawfully taken and detained a child, Thomas, natural son of the late Marquess of Dondurey, from the guardianship of his nearest kin, the Dowager Duchess of Renford, and further that she held a forged instrument purporting to be a record of marriage, the uttering of which was a felony. The boy was to be delivered to the Dowager pending the hearing. Clara was to be held. It was beautifully done. Adrian felt his mother's hand in every line. She had not tried to stop him reaching Carlisle. She had made certain that when he arrived, Clara would be a felon and a kidnapper. The certificate evidence of her crime, rather than proof of Thomas's birth. And the boy in the Dowager's keeping by nightfall, where an inconvenient ring might quietly vanish, where a child might be sent abroad and lost as thoroughly as a torn page in a fire. They're taking him, Clara said, the boy's hand crushed in hers, her voice stripped of all its hard-won steadiness. Adrian, they'll send him away and I'll never. The constable was already in the doorway. I carried him 11 years. You will not. But her arms were not strong enough to hold against the law, and the boy was crying, reaching, and the worst sound Adrian had ever heard was Thomas calling for his mother as a stranger lifted him toward the door. Stop, said Adrian. He did not shout it. He said it in his mother's own voice, the cold, flat, ducal voice he had spent his life hating and, it turned out, learned perfectly. The constable halted. You hold a summons sworn by the Dowager Duchess of Renford, Adrian said, naming that child the natural son of my late brother. I am the Duke of Renford, and I am here this morning to swear, before witnesses, that the boy is not natural but legitimate, that I have known of my brother's lawful marriage these 11 years, and concealed it, and come now to set it right. The instrument is no forgery, I will attest its truth myself. Which means you are not holding a kidnapper, Constable, you are holding the mother of the 9th Duke of Renford. And the child in your arms outranks every soul in this room, myself included. He let it land. Put him down. Gently, the boy was set down. He ran to Clara, and she folded over him. It was not over. A sworn information could not be waved away by a duke's word in a coaching inn. But it stopped the morning, and got them to the bishop's court, where the registrar pulled the Carlisle record from its shelf, the thing his mother had not believed existed, because she had burned what she could see. Adrian swore his oath, and every word cost him the title he had worn since he was 24, and he had never spent anything so freely. But his mother had one move left, and she made it 3 days later, in the worst possible place, the only kind of place she ever chose. The Bishop of Carlisle held an assembly each season, and half the gentry of 2 counties attended, and the dowager swept in on the arm of her cousin, the Earl of Marish. Adrian understood her plan the moment he saw her face. If she could not keep the title from the boy, she would poison his possession of it, name Clara a fortune huntress and the child a clever fraud before the most public room in Cumberland, so that even if the law found for them, society never would. She began at once, loudly, to a widening circle. And I am told we are to congratulate my son on his sudden discovery of a conscience. How fortunate for the adventuress. 11 years she stayed silent, and the very week my back is turned, the very week, said Clara, stepping into the circle, that I learned you had finally found out my son was alive, madam, and meant to take him. The room turned. This was the thing Clara understood that the dowager had not. She was not afraid of a public room. She had been afraid of poverty, of losing the boy, of a duke's threat, never once of being looked at. I'll tell you all a story, Clara said, to the room, not to the dowager, her clear voice carrying to the corners. 12 years ago a marquess fell in love with a clergyman's daughter and married her in a country church because he was a good man and would not ruin her. A year later, he drowned. His mother decided the marriage was beneath the family and had it struck from the register, and sent his brother to buy the widow's silence with £40 in a coaching inn. She let the murmur crest. I was the widow. This is my son. He is the 9th Duke of Renford, by every law of God and England, and his grandmother has just told you I forged the proof. So let us settle it simply. She turned to Adrian, not asking rescue, telling him his part, and held out her hand, and he placed in it the thing he had carried for 3 days against this moment. His father's signet, the seal of Renford, struck from the same die as the lion on every door of Ravensmore, and the head of every letter the dowager has ever sealed. She held it up. The gold lion caught the light of 100 candles. Sebastian Stern put it in my hand on a dock at Whitehaven and told me to keep it for the child. I kept it 11 years through every winter that would have been warmer if I'd sold it. Madam, you call me a forger and a thief. Here is the one thing in England that cannot be forged. Tell this room your son never owned it. Tell them it isn't his hand it was made to fit. And the Dowager Duchess of Renford, for the first time in Adrian's life, had nothing to say. It was the Earl of Marish who broke it. Old, blunt, half-deaf, peering at the ring through his glass. That's the Renford seal right enough. Knew Sebastian as a boy. That's his, or I'm a Dutchman. And he bowed stiffly to the bewildered child at Clara's side, the first man in the world to do it. Your Grace. The word went round the room like fire in dry grass. Your Grace. To the boy, and the dowager stood in the center of it, upright, dry, defeated not by law, but by 100 witnesses, watching an earl bow to her grandson. And she understood. Adrian saw her understand that there was no version of this evening she left as anything but the woman who had tried to rob a child of his name and failed in public. She left without another word. She had always known when she had lost the room. Adrian found Clara on the terrace afterward, in the cold, clean air, with the boy asleep at last on a bench, wrapped in Adrian's own coat. She was looking at the ring in her open palm. "You didn't need me," he said, "in there. You did the whole of it yourself. I only carried the ring. You gave up a dukedom 3 days ago to stop a constable taking my son," she said. "I think you've done your share." She closed her hand. "I spent 11 years deciding what I'd say to you if I ever stood in front of you again." The speeches were all about £40. She looked up. "I don't want to make them anymore. I'm tired of carrying the worst thing you ever did. I'd rather see what you do next." "What I do next," said Adrian, "is whatever you'll let me. I have no title now. By Michaelmas I'll have no house. It's the boys, all of it, and rightly. I can offer you nothing but a ruined man's name, and even that I held on a lie until last week." He took a breath. It was braver than the oath, because the oath could not be refused, and this could. "Marry me anyway. Not for the boy, he is yours, and his fortune his own. For me, I would rather be poor and yours than a duke, and what I was." She was quiet so long he thought he had lost it. Then she stepped into him and put her free hand against his cold cheek and kissed him, and finally, after a fortnight of stepping back from the edge of himself, he did not step back, and he felt 11 years of the man his mother made him fall away into the dark off the terrace. And what was left, when she drew away, was only a man holding a woman in the cold, with a sleeping child and a gold ring between them. "That," she murmured, "took you long enough." A year later, on a bright June morning, the same terrace looked out over a garden Clara had ordered replanted, and Thomas had helped to dig, getting more soil on himself than into the beds. The boy was Duke of Renford in law now, his name written into the registry at Carlisle in an ink that would not be burned. He was also 11, and far more interested in the frog he had found by the new pond than in the 700 years of stern dukes glaring down from the gallery walls, which Clara counted the great triumph of her mothering. Adrian, plain Mr. Stern now, guardian to a duke and husband to a clergyman's daughter, sat with his wife on the bench where he had once asked her to ruin herself with him, and watched the boy show the frog to Mrs. Pell. The dowager had retired to a small dim house in Bath, where she received few callers and was received by fewer, the story of the assembly having travelled faster than any post. She wrote once, asking to see her grandson. Thomas had said he supposed so, if his mother came too, because he was not sure his grandmother had stopped being a dragon. They had not yet gone. There was no hurry, Clara said. The dragon had used up her fire, and a boy had only one childhood. The signet ring sat now where it had always belonged. Too large still for the boy's hand, it hung on its cord at his neck, and he had a habit, when thinking, of turning it in his fingers exactly as his father once had, a gesture Adrian had told him of, one of the small, living true things he had begun at last to give the boy in place of sermons. Your father sang flat, and turned his ring when he thought, and forgave people he shouldn't. And you have all three of him in you, and I knew him, and I will tell you everything I remember for as long as you want to hear it. He'll lose that ring in the pond if he keeps leaning over it, Adrian said. He won't, said Clara, leaning into the warmth of him. He's carried it carefully his whole life. He gets that from his mother. She watched her son tip back his head and laugh at something Mrs. Pell had said. The still moment before it, and then all at once, his father's laugh in a living boy. In the garden of the house that was his by right, and his by law, and finally, his by daylight. We got there, she said softly. It took 11 years, and a 40-pound debt, and a man learning to be brave on the very last morning he could. But we got there. Adrian lifted her hand and kissed it, and looked out at the boy and the frog and the new green garden, and found, for the first time in his life, that he had nothing he wished to step back from. We got there, he said.